Do you think that we are witnessing now a shift in the European stance on the Palestinian cause, especially within more European states showing willingness or actual steps towards the recognition of the Palestinian statehood? And is the over 18-month genocidal war playing a role in this shift?
Thank you for having me, Hannah. Indeed, of course, the Israeli war in Gaza did push the European Union to adopt a more balanced stance on the issue of the Israel-Palestine conflict that is more understanding and accommodating of Palestinian interests and legitimate aspirations, basically. And I think that this can be witnessed by how some individual European countries conduct themselves with regard to their policy making vis-a-vis the issue in Palestine. Some European countries went as far as to recognize Palestinian statehood. This used to be a taboo in many Western circles. But of course, the majority of the European Union still hasn't recognized Palestine as a state yet. They would prefer to do that when a two-state solution is achieved. And as we all know, this is mission impossible given the current state of affairs and the Israeli moves on the ground that seek to eradicate any prospects of Palestinian statehood. Yet we are witnessing a positive trend with regards to European policy towards Palestine, and this was strongly demonstrated by the visit of President Emmanuel Macron to Cairo a few days ago. And of course, this visit was of historical proportions, as France, one of the leading powerhouses of the European Union. It is the second strongest economy in the European Union, the strongest military force of the European Union, a nuclear power, and a permanent member of the Security Council. And they, of course, influence EU policy in many ways, especially with regards to foreign policy. He expressed rather very strong support to Palestinian aspirations and even pledged that France might recognize Palestine as a state within the next few weeks, maybe by June or something. But of course, this is not the first time France has promised to do such a thing. Such promises were made since 2014. So I do not take these promises seriously. And the recognition of Palestinian statehood is of little consequence, unfortunately, when it comes to the actual state of affairs on the ground, on the ability to influence the situation on the ground in Palestine.
Okay, but still, Dr. Osman, France's declared intention to recognize the Palestinian state still marks a potential turning point. So what does this signal about the evolving EU position?
It does have symbolic dimensions. If France does that, many countries will follow suit in the European Union because, as we said, France is an instrumental and powerful country in the European Union. So if they decide to take a stance recognizing Palestine as a state, of course, this will attract more recognitions from other European nations. And let's not forget that the EU has 27 members as states as its members. So that's a sizable portion of the nation states of the world, the UN member states. However, in the bigger scheme of things, over 145 countries already recognize Palestine. So this is, in the bigger scheme of things, is of little consequence, unfortunately. However, it does have very good symbolism. It does give more credibility and more legitimacy to the Palestinian cause, meaning that, that not only the global South and the East supports Palestine, but no, the European plan also supports Palestine and Palestinian statehood. And this, of course, will put some sort of moral pressure on Israel. However, it will not go far beyond that, especially that a French recognition of the Palestinians does not guarantee a universal European recognition, because we should never discount Germany. The upcoming German chancellor, the potential German chancellor, or the presumptive German chancellor, Friedrich Merz, he is a very pro-Israeli leader. And even though he called for ceasefire in Gaza, he does reject the idea of unilaterally recognizing Palestine without a permanent settlement. And he also explicitly said that if Netanyahu visits Germany when he's in power, when he comes to power or takes office as a German chancellor, he will not enforce the ICC arrest warrant against him. So we should not be overexcited
Yes.
By the prospects of some more EU support to Palestine, because by any means it's not universal and it's not on the same footing.
Okay.
Each country, at the end of the day, commands its own foreign policy at the European Union.
But still, Netanyahu's aggressive response to Macron's announcement actually reflects growing Israeli hostility. How might this strain European-Israeli relations going forward?
Because it will look, in terms of optics, it will look very bad for Israel, not only for Netanyahu, for a very simple reason. France has been one of the core supporters of Israel since its inception in 1948. At some point, France was the major arms supplier for Israel before the United States became so in the 1950s and 60s. And also France aided Israel in developing its own nuclear program. So as you can see, they have a very strong relationship historically. And also France is home to the largest Jewish community in the European continent. So having a country as big as France and as influential as France, a major power basically, recognizing Palestine, that will make it the majority of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, the 5 permanent members. 3 of them now will recognize Palestine. Russia and China already recognized Palestine a very long time ago. If France follows suit, that means that only Britain and the United States will be the only 2 other permanent member nuclear powers of the Security Council who did not recognize Palestine. And of course, this will have a symbolic shift with regards to moral support for the Palestinian cause. But at the end of the day, again, I do reiterate that this, if it's not supported,
this shouldn't be taken optimistic or too optimistically, in your own opinion. We should still be more realistic about it. Okay. So will the re-emergence of the 2-state solution at the EU level during the first high-level EU-Palestinian level political dialogue between the EU and the Palestinian Authority, will this have any tangible impact, or is it more rhetorical than real, since you are too realistic, Dr. Osman?
It's too rhetorical. I will not disappoint you.
I expected that answer, yes.
Yeah, it's way too rhetorical, because the European Union has supported the 2-state solution for decades. So this did not change anything. The European Union, the Middle East Quartet, for example, which was founded in the early 2000s, that was supposed to lead the peace process in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, or the Israelis and the Palestinians. It was led by the quartet. The 4 members were the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and Russia. Yes. So as you can see, the European Union has been a part of the equation since a very long time ago, and yet they have always failed to deliver substantially, because they did not act as a balancing force with the United States, meaning that they never applied actual concrete pressure on Israel. Is the European Union capable on the ground of applying a very strong pressure on Israel? Yes, they are. The European Union is one of the largest trade partners of Israel, and they supply Israel with a lot of technology and a lot of essential goods. If the European Union, for example, decides to impose sanctions on Israel the way they did on Russia, for example, or on Syria, or on Iran, or on any other country, goodness gracious, Israel will be under a lot of pressure then, and then they might even reconsider it, and this will be a counterbalance to the unlimited US support. However, is the EU willing to go that far? It doesn't seem that they are willing to go that far. So that's why, as long as they are not willing to apply punitive action against Israel collectively as a European Union, then it does not go beyond being rhetorical, unfortunately.
I see your point, but I still want to ask you, could this continued European divergence from the US and Israeli positions spark broader diplomatic shifts in the region, or still we should be more realistic about it?
I think this is actually a valid point, because the growing divergence between the US and Israel, between the US and the European Union, on account of Trump's policies, that is basically divorcing the United States.
He was just mentioning that, Dr. Osman, today when he talked about the European Union paying their bills, and how,
exactly.
Yes, and how this caused
Exactly.
damage to the United States during the Biden administration. Yes.
President Trump is now treating the European Union as if they are an enemy, for example. So it's quite crazy, the
Well, he
times
said
of
it.
the.
He said it explicitly. If they want our protection, they need to pay for it. He was very
Exactly.
frank about
Exactly.
it.
So on the security front, he's asking them to pay for protection in Europe from Russia, for example. On the economic front, he is imposing very harsh tariffs on the European Union to force them to open their markets more to American goods, which would basically destroy the European economies and eviscerate them. And he's selling them energy at a very, very high cost. So as you can see, the United States is completely divorcing itself from Europe at the moment.
Yes.
If this becomes a sustained trend and the European Union and the United States, their alliance, whether economically or geopolitically and security-wise as well, is severed for good, then yes, the European Union might now be more encouraged to adopt a way more independent foreign policy. And in case they do that, and that's very likely, by the way, maybe then we will see at least some EU countries applying actual pressure on Israel, given, of course, that the European Union does not collapse and that the right wing will not come to power in many European countries, which will then destroy the European Union itself as an institution and got it inside out. And the European far right, populist right in general, unfortunately, is very supportive of Israel on par with Trump's level of support.
Yes, I get your point, and I
I'm
enjoy
sorry,
talking to you
I'm
very
trying
much.
to be optimistic, but I can't. So.
Yes, I get your point. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohamed Osman, for the enjoyable discussion. Dr. Mohamed Osman, International Relations Specialist, thank you so much for your analysis and